Good afternoon. Welcome to the third annual 2021 Cook County Racial Equity Week. Imagine, Intersect, and Act. I am Skyla Hearn, the inaugural manager of archives for Cook County government, offices under the president, and will serve as the moderator for this conversation. It is truly my honor. It is truly an honor to be here this afternoon in conversation with my great colleagues and good friends, Director of Education Erica Griffin and historian and assistant curator Julius Jones, both with the Chicago History Museum. Erica and Julius will be discussing, with the teens' permission, art and history projects with focus on The Floor's Theirs, Teens Reclaim and Reactivate History, and the Afro-American Patrolmen's League project. Viewing history through a transformative lens as liberatory memory and cultural workers, we provide educational experiences, evidence, and opportunities to deepen the understanding that history is live and occurs in real time, as well as provides evidence of the past. With this understanding, we can connect to current happenings, place ourselves in historical context, and develop knowledge to help understand our collective past with solutions to creating a just world now and into the future. Through these experiences, young people can find themselves in the archives, create social justice art, and see themselves as part of history. As an archivist, I love to share, especially with young folks, how I found myself in the archives, in history. My parents purchased my childhood home, which was once a site of social service to the African American community. The name of the home and organization was the Home for Aged and Infirm Colored People, later named Jane Dent Home, which was founded in the 1890s by two African American women, Gabriella Knighton Smith and Fannie Mason, which then operated successfully under African American leadership for almost 80 years to provide care for older African Americans who were unable to receive resources and services throughout the Chicagoland area. Before we get into our discussion, we like to share a bit about our background as a panel and how we came together to do this important work.
Hello, Skyla. Hello, Julius. How are you both doing?
Well, hi, Erica. Fantastic.
Long time no see. So this is the part we talk about ourselves, correct?
Yes, please.
We all together to be this amazing, outstanding group advocating for missing histories and the like. Should I start?
Yes, please. You have the floor.
Will do. Absolutely. You know, to me, first of all, let me say thank you, Skyla, for bringing me on again to speak with your audiences. And anytime that I'm able to engage with you and Julius at the same time, it's perfect. But for me, the rallying place where we all met and learned and shaped our praxis as museum professionals, as memory workers, and as legacy keepers for Black stories is the DuSable Museum of African American History. It is a wonderful place, a place that put community first, a place that really instilled in me that activism could come in many different forms. And in my role in the education department, being an advocate for Black stories, making space for all to engage, share their perspectives, and learn together, to create together, that could be activism as well. So coming through the doors, meeting all of the people that worked in that spirit, the personalities as well, was amazing. And I, for one, am proud of the work that we were able to accomplish. You know, the DuSable means a good deal to all of us. So that was our origin. If either of you want to add anything else, to me, it was everything. The DuSable continues to be everything.
Yeah, I think we, approached our work there with a deep sort of appreciation for, as Skyla's opening remarks alluded to, the idea that the practice of history is ongoing. You know, we in our culture, we don't practice history as distant events in the past, but we understand that they are lived moments designed and intended to be reactivated constantly. And that's how we sort of are able to activate the lessons that history has for us in our present and as we sort of shape a future. And I think, you know, so much of the work that you two women did, and that we did together in terms of bringing the community into the practice of history, a community centric approach, around, you know, programming, archival collections, for myself, oral histories, and engagement with audience. All of those things, I think, really sort of speak to the power of history in our contemporary moment to inspire, to edify, and hopefully we sort of see that history continues to allow people to think critically about their present and to think strategically about the future that they want to create.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Exactly. I'm sorry, Erica, were you about to say something?
You know, I was going to get on a soapbox, but I'll stop. All I was going to add briefly is co-signing everything Julius said, of course, and always. But, you know, inviting the community into these processes, to me, help fulfill a mission that, you know, we all sort of share, is to build cultural awareness and instill pride in histories that are well known or unknown. And the DuSable, that spirit of everybody come and learn, everyone grow together. So I sort of carry with me as we continue on with our work. And as we continue on, I'm just going to share my screen because I found some wonderful images of us that we might want to take a look at. Is beyond. Let's see what we have. If the computer will allow, it sure will. There we go.
Okay.
All right, and I am hoping that the screen is sharing, but I found two wonderful images here. And Skyla, if you want to talk about the image that is in the Ames Auditorium at the DuSable, we can start with that one.
I believe that, and this is really funny, like I have to get super close, but I believe that this image is of one of the programs that we had where we work with the community to kind of co-pilot, right? Because we don't want to assume that because, you know, we're the professionals in the room that we know everything. So we work together with the local community to help them to archive their personal archival materials that were at home. And, you know, pretty much what that meant was just working with them to digitize, so scan their materials, upload to a USB, which they were then able to take home. But, you know, in the process of that practice, we were in conversation with them as well, talking with them about the importance of, you know, their family's histories and the importance of legacy and how, you know, our legacies do connect and in some cases overlap. And, you know, and just really quickly, if I could, and I'm going to get up on that box with you, Erica, because as I'm looking at these pictures and thinking about us and how we connected through our work at the DuSable, I think in terms of how now we're able to still continuously like uplift Dr. Margaret Burroughs's legacy as legacy holders, right? Because as I mentioned before, we're liberatory memory workers. And in doing that work, we are upholding the legacies as well as, you know, creating these experiences and opportunities, not just for younger people, but really for us all, and just connecting like the importance of what that means for our society. So I had to join up on that soapbox because, you know, I look at you two as creators and the roles and the work that, you know, is ongoing at Chicago History Museum. I think of myself in terms of, you know, carrying out the idea that President Preckwinkle had in order to establish an archives for Cook County, right? Like the importance, which of course will later connect to our conversation about, these wonderful like ideas and practices that, Black women have been able to and continue to implement for our society at large. And Erica, what is this picture to the left? What's happening there?
This other one, it's in that same spirit of togetherness and putting community first and learning from them, with them, co-creating, so to speak. So we're looking at a grouping of volunteers at one of the volunteer training events, or it may have been this is one of the year-end volunteer celebration events that we would have at DuSable. And each and every one of these wonderful women and men were part of that network, part of sharing in Dr. Burroughs' vision, not only for the institution, but for Black history and how it gets out there, and, instilling in especially our young people the understanding that when you have that knowledge of who you are, where your people have been, and you have that better idea of where you could go, what the future could be, as Julius was saying. And I thought that it would be great to share, that picture, because as Skyla was saying, we are the professionals in the room, so to speak, but that by no means indicates that we're not learning from those that we are in service to. That kind of knowledge share happens organically. And that was another one of the highlights of working together with you all at the DuSable.
I know. I'm grateful to that place for bringing us together, and also, for helping us to, create deeper connections to the community, and really to the Chicagoland area and beyond at large. So thank you for sharing those pictures, Erica. So okay, well then let's round back to our discussion. And as I said, so we're here in this space to talk about these wonderful projects. And so, the floor is theirs. Teams Reclaim and Reactivate History explores the roles of some extraordinary young people, some high school students who are working on projects that join art with history to amplify overlooked histories and forgotten narratives of Black women in service to community and citizenship during the quest for universal suffrage, to reactivate voided spaces and challenge key epistemologies of our city's history. And thank you, by the way, Erica, for providing this wonderful description, because you all know if it were left up to me, we will be listening to the entire session, or this entire session would be me speaking passionately and very long-windedly. And so, I'll just jump in with our first question. So as I mentioned, we're here in this space to discuss multiple art and history, in a sense, team-led projects. But first, Erica, I would like for you to start with an introduction to the Voids project. And, please share with us the impetus behind why, as well as how you were inspired to create the Voids project.
Absolutely, Skyla. And as I mentioned, so much of the work that I do, although I am at the Chicago History Museum now, was inspired by Dr. Margaret Burroughs, inspired by this dynamic woman who did so much to amplify the stories, especially stories of Black women that were in service to community, that used art making and the like to convey messages, to contend with history, to contend with the epistemologies of many stories, and the shaping of our city at large. And what I wanted to do was bring that to the Chicago History Museum and bring that to our newly developing teen audience, because they're going to be our future. They are our future in so many ways already. They're thinking light years ahead of the rest of us, and we have to realize and make space for them so that they understand the stories and so that they can better shape the world around them. So last year, to coincide with the anniversary of the ratification of the women's right to vote, the History Museum was set to put on an exhibition that was meant to be in person called Democracy Limited. And that was an exploration of women that were important to suffrage, to the vote, to activism in our city in and around that time period. And when we think about that epistemology, when we think about that origin story that is set to be fixed in a lot of people's minds, we think about some of those key names that we know of. There's Frances Willard, of course, and Jane Addams and the like. And, perhaps there are mentions of Ida B. Wells. But the narrative is usually skewed toward women of the hegemony, women that tend to be white, tend to be moneyed, because they were the ones that were able to come and command, that their voices be heard, that their voices be acknowledged. And unfortunately, Black women that were active on Chicago's South Side in and around that same time period don't get the visibility. The places and spaces where they were active are left largely vacant or have been made dormant or voided, which is the name of the project. And I just remember one day thinking about the exhibition. This was deep within the pandemic when there was no one on the street. And I rode through some areas on the South Side, just thinking about the exhibition, knowing that it was coming up and knowing that we wanted to engage teens in the story. And driving through the South Side, where you find many vacant lots or areas that have been redeveloped, in my mind, I kept going back to what was there and how connecting place and space with history is so important. As we've all been saying, in our conversation today, having that understanding does really allow people to think about what the futures could be, knowing what kind of work happened there, who lived in a place, what services were there, what histories happened there too, is important. And I wanted to encourage teens to come in, to mine and comb through archives, to learn these stories, learn the stories of these women, the work that they did, understand what used to exist in the physical spaces on Chicago's South Side, and then have our teens respond to it. Understand the stories, understand the legacies of these women, and then create something in response. So I honestly started with this image right here on the screen that I hope you all can see. And I don't know if we have the ability to put questions in the chat, but if I were to ask, does anyone know the story behind this building? We'd asked lots of different ways, just in programs at the History Museum. And there were a lot of, blank stares, or I don't know, or, let me think on that. And I would give a little bit more context. This building is on the South Side of Chicago. It was a place of service to Black women, created by Black women. It was a home that offered shelter and safety, but also education and civic conversation, civic awareness for these same women. And it was these types of spaces that had been silenced, had gone dormant, had been forgotten, that I wanted our teens to reactivate and think about the legacy and then speculate a future. So for those of you that might not know the answer, that building is the Phyllis Wheatley Club and Home that is on 51st Street, right on Chicago's South Side. And we're looking here at the Christmas Annual, which is part of the museum's, Chicago History Museum's collection. This second video is of the home as it stood late last fall or winter. And then what you see on the last image here is our teens starting to think about reimagining, reinterpreting, repositioning these places, reclaiming them and making them active through their own artistic visioning. So what we did was we selected 4 spaces that had been silenced, that weren't always included in the narrative of not only service at the top of the 1900s, but also these places that were in service to suffrage, that quested not only for rights and humanity, but also the vote for women. So we're looking here at different pieces of archival material from the History Museum's collection, again, that speak to the Negro Fellowship League, the Phyllis Wheatley Home, the Emmanuel Settlement Home, and the Elam Home for working women. So We pulled all of these materials together. We developed a guidebook filled with other material, other archival material, with video clips, with books, with articles and the like, really positioning our teens to be in the best possible state of mind to think critically about what these spaces were, what their legacies were, and then do the work to create. And here we have our teens. So we sent our application materials far and wide throughout Chicagoland, and we ultimately selected 8 students into the program. Some from Wendell Phillips Academy High School, which was a perfect fit because most of these voided spaces were near to Wendell Phillips, and we know Wendell Phillips, of course, has its own outstandingly important history. The Air Force Academy, Morgan Park High School, and Lindblom High School. And here they all are. And what I put here were just some quotes that, these young people came into the program with. All of them were interested in history or interested in the arts or interested in civics and how to amalgamate all of these different disciplines together into one project, I think. Really, really galvanized them and got them excited about the project. I'm also going to note I will be using their words exclusively for the rest of the program because, as the title states, the floor is theirs and continues to be. So this was their work, their stories, and their attempt to respond and act off of the histories. So we had people like Jade that were interested in U.S. history and learning about different events and what's led them to happening. We have people like Brooke. Brooke really, really loved to read. She was a firecracker in the program. She loved reading. She loved stories, and she loved connecting history to the modern world and had a deep curiosity into Chicago's communities. We had Morgan, who had an interest in stories like the founder of our city, Jean-Baptiste Pointe-Toussaint, and they all just were amazing and were open and were creative, and we were sort of building the car as we drove along. So their thoughts and their ideas for the program really show quite clearly in the final product. So once we had our guidebook set, we had our teams selected, we started designing our workshop series. The teams met every single week on a Saturday, I might add, for 90 minutes at a time. And they met with archivists like Skyla Hearn and Tracy Drake. They met with community workers, activists, and authors like Essence McDowell, with librarians like Gretchen Neidhart from the Chicago History Museum, each one of them imparting, their own journey to museum work or memory work, their own journeys to advocacy for community. And this by far was our team's favorite part. They enjoyed engaging with the archival materials, but hearing directly from the people that do the work, from so many women, I might add, really inspired them to keep going. So when the workshops had concluded, they set about designing their zine. Now, remember, we were only allowed to meet virtually because of the COVID-19 virus. So I will not say that it was difficult for them to connect with us, but we were limited by our reach. We were limited to collections of materials that we could source online, but that did not stop our teams at all. They were, like I said, creative and innovative and really just inspired by these women to think and respond. The message that they wanted to convey to everyone are here in the bullet points. They wanted to develop a zine being sort of a made booklet incorporating arts and other types of imagery that could be hosted online or in person. They wanted this zine to amplify the spaces that Ida and Fanny, Elizabeth and Melissa were active in, who they were active for, and what they did, even though they faced racism, sexism, and prejudice. They wanted people to know where history happened and look at Chicago's South Side with new eyes. Their own eyes included, I might add. We want people to see more than vacant lots and see the history that was made there. They also wanted people to know Black women can be leaders and Black women advocate for Black women. They wanted to imagine what these places could be if they were still open today. And here are a sampling of some of the tools that we used, because remember, we were completely virtual. Even their art had to be created digitally. So we used everything from, of course, Zoom to Adobe Photoshop to Canva, whatever platforms we could find to do the work. That's what we had on hand. And as you can see, this is just a sampling of the outstanding work that our teams created in response to the stories that surrounded these women, beyond their own activism, but moments that they lived through, like the race riot, moments that they lived through, like the murder of Eugene Williams, moments that they lived through, like the ratification of the vote for women. And I wish I had time to go through each and every one of these, because it's so impactful to see these teens connecting with the stories in ways that really inspired them. Was amazing every single session that we had. Now, to keep them moving in our virtual world, the teens created a project playlist. And as we would go on through the day, we would always, we would take breaks every now and then, or open our program with sound to get our teens in that activist, in that advocacy mode. And I can share in the chat the link to their playlist. You can see what the teens were jamming to as they continued on with their work. Many of these stories, as we know, are hurtful. Many of them are indicative of the violence that Black women faced at the time and continue to face, and making room for self-care, making room to step back and breathe, taking breaks, moving away from the work for a time. Those were all parts of the process every single week. And now what we're seeing more closely are the creative responses. So we're looking at some of the Canva responses from two of our students, Jane and Hashem, and they're simply trying to condense all of these stories down into words that are going to move people, because the other half of the project was on creativity. So you might understand the history, but how do you make others understand it? What are the tools that you can use to get people to respond, to stop, to care about something? And art was the medium that the teens chose to use. So we see them here responding to the Elam home in this particular slide. So what these places meant to them, how they use design principles to structure their graphic images. And here's more work that the teens did. So beyond, Canva, beyond working in a space that is sort of flat, we encourage the teens to take archival images and reimagine them in a different format. So thinking about all of the things that these women were, what these women stood for, how these women worked, and how that sort of impacted, really inspired our teens to create, to take these images that are flat, breathe life into them, and set about that work to imagine what these places could be if they were open. What are the legacies of these women that carry on to the present? So these are three of my absolute favorite. Of course, we have Ida B. Wells, we have the Elam home here, and we have Fannie Hagen Emanuel. I also wanted to just close here with the teens' thoughts about what these places could be if they were still here today. Speaking to the Phyllis Wheatley home, they were particularly inspired by the work that Skyla and Tracy Drake do to address memory, to amplify memory and incorporate it into work. And they felt that the Phyllis Wheatley home could house an archive and document the work of Black women that are in service to Black women over time through to the present. And then also thinking about the Elam home and how that place was a safe space, how it provided so much for women that were passing through the city, women that, were there to stay for a time. And they imagined the Elam home could be a shelter, a self-defense training spot, one that would encourage everyone to teach everyone else, so that cipher, that cycle of knowledge and of sharing continued on. And then, of course, in our last slide, we have to thank some of the wonderful women that worked with us. So, of course, we have Skyla and Tracy Drake, Gretchen Neidhart, and Essence McDowell. Our teens were so inspired by them. These are their renderings that they've created. It's a beautiful testament to the work that these four did with our teens, and also to our teens' creativity, and that of our outstanding designer, Stanford Carpenter, who helped our teens imagine and use the tools that we had at hand. So for anyone that might be interested in seeing the teens' work, it is now housed and is a permanent part of the democracylimited.org website. The exhibition that was intended to be in person has turned virtual. So I will drop the link down into the chat for those of you that are interested, but check it out, support, and be on the lookout for more engagement from the History Museum for Teens, because it is undergoing. It is undergoing. Is that a word? It is ongoing and will continue into the future. All right, Skyla, I only went over a few minutes. My apologies.
That was fantastic, and please don't apologize. I wish that, we had all of the time, but, hopefully this will open the floor for us to continue these conversations on different spaces, perhaps, at home, in our home institutions, or virtually, a few times a year, and we can invite everyone back to learn even more about the progress of these projects. So thank you, Erica. And so now, Julius, you have the floor. We'd love to hear from you about what you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. We are just in the beginning stages of our Afro-American Patrolmen's League Oral History Project. So the Chicago History Museum was chosen as the repository for the AAPL's records, and we've had them for several years now, and we just recently completed the digitization of those records as part of the ProQuest History Vault series. So we, have the physical collection, and we digitized it, and that was spearheaded by our wonderful archivist team, Julie Wroblewski, who's now our head of collections. We have Angela Solis, who's working closely with me on the project. So we really put a lot of time and effort into it. But I think in the spirit of what Erica's talking about, we want to go beyond having these things, and we want to activate these things. And so as part of that, we wanted to give the opportunity for members of this organization to share their stories. And so this summer, we started the oral history program. We've already done a handful of interviews, and we'll continue for the next couple of years. And our hope is that they can culminate in an exhibition. But we don't want to just merely produce a physical exhibition. We want to give the opportunity for people to engage beyond that. And so one of the ideas that we have is to replicate this wonderful, sort of teen historian model that we've done with Voice. We've done it with our American Medina exhibition, and we want to do the same thing with AAPL. And so we are hopeful that within, hopefully the next year, we'll be able to launch a teen historian program around the AAPL project. So we're constantly thinking about ways to continue that engagement. And I think in our contemporary moment, with so much discussion around issues of race and policing, the stories of the men and women who were a part of the AAPL, who worked to improve the quality of policing in Chicago and improve the treatment of marginalized people at the hands of law enforcement, I think has clear resonances for us in this contemporary moment. And we hope to sort of activate this story and bring it to bear as a part of our thinking as a society of what the future of policing should look like. And I think there are lessons that we can glean from the past in terms of thinking about our present and the future we want to create. So next year at the 4th annual Racial Equity Week, I'll have a nice PowerPoint of all the work that's been done in the previous year around the AAPL Oral History Project.
Thank you. Thank you. I am here for all of it. This is all so inspiring. And, just now thinking about these projects, I'm wondering if CHM has a teen arts program, because I know that these are, individual projects that they can work on alongside, you all as museum professionals, as well as your colleagues there at CHM. But yeah, and the reason that I thought of that as well is because I know that the AIC, the National Museum of Mexican Art, Shy Arts, these are all teen art programs that often have teen led exhibitions and like programs and projects. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Skyla. And, you know, to your question, I can respond with this. For some time, I'm not sure if there was resistance. I don't think that was it exactly, but understanding where art fits in at a history museum was something that the institution had to sort of determine for themselves, so to speak. We are just now conceiving of a teen council that will be ongoing at the History Museum that brings together young people from across the city to engage in conversations about historical past, to think about the present, to speculate futures and what that means, and what that outlet, what that output is going to be, and what it should be is arts. It's art making is a response to the world around us, and especially thinking about a city like Chicago, where we have a third of the population that is white, a third that is African American, and a third that is Latinx or Latino. There are a lot of narratives there. There are many, many hyphenations there, and how history has happened or impacted those communities, those people is different. And that's evident in the work that we've done so far. In addition to the Voids Project, this summer, we collaborated on 3 additional teen engagements. One that spoke to photography and documenting Chicago. And there were teens from all over the city, from Beverly to Inglewood and many places in between, Little Village. And, we're using the camera. They're all learning the same directional positionality. They're all learning how to use, the photography tools and techniques, but the output, how they see the city, if you give them all the same prompt, it manifests in different ways. And it's so beautiful to see. And I think we are now understanding that as an institution, and it will be a mainstay, this collaboration or merging of history, of art that's informed by history, and giving the teens, the wheel to lead those projects is outstanding. So going forward for as many exhibitions as we can, we make space for teens in the budget. And then we will have that standing teen council that will be on hand to help shape curriculum materials, to respond to our exhibitions, to have a say, to have the floor, as we've been saying. So hopefully I too will be back for this week next year to share more with you, but stay tuned. There are wonderful things coming as the museum shifts away from, that historical society model to one that is more inclusive, that allows for restorative work with the necessary empathy to conduct it successfully. We have great things in store for our team.
Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just got excited because I know with you, especially at the helm, that all things are possible. So yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Erica.
Well, I wasn't on the spot. I'll keep talking if you want, but I figured I should.
Right. No. I mean, like I said, I'm here for all of it. And then, you're absolutely right, because, I think of how art is a tool, for change and of change, and how socially and politically engaged art, definitely does that. And how just thinking in terms of like symbolism, and how like within the symbolism itself, like how that's a very strong unifier for, like different groups, so. And we know, so what I'm thinking of right now is, the fist, and how, like the fist has been used by multiple ethnic groups, right?
Mhm.
In terms of resistance, and in terms of, fighting oppression, and, these unjust systems under which, throughout history we've had to live. And and I just think about that, right? Like in terms of the symbolism, and in terms of how we connect meaning to these visual images, and also connected to what you were saying about photography. For a lot of us, photography was that key into being introduced to history, right? Like what is, like you started your introduction to us of the Voice Project, with the image of the Elam house. Like, what is the story here? What is this about? And and I think that it's so powerful that you all are working with young people to put them in a place of power, to put them in a place to understand their positioning as important, and also to provide them with the challenge, which we see that they accepted, to then challenge these traditional canons under which these institutions have operated. I would like to say up until now, because as we can see, like again, these transformative practices are taking place. For example, just what you've shared today alone, like working with teens. So it's very much so from this person-centered approach, which is something that, historically it just hasn't been done in terms of, putting the work in a place where teens can then speak for themselves and can put us in the position to co-pilot them, right, as they develop knowledge about who they are and the world around us. So I think that was like my last comment. But then if you all have anything else to add or any questions, I would really love to hear it. Or
Yeah.
we would love to hear it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I always sort of appreciate this opportunity to speak with you two women, because I think you really sort of put at the forefront that history and memory work is restorative, and it's also empowering. And we sort of are not finding random information, in this sort of trivia pursuit kind of method, which I think for some people is often the way they approach history, right? It's sort of things that are cool to know, right? But I think and I think that some of this is cultural. We sort of understand our history to be our strength, to sort of be empowering to us. And we sort of thirst for information about our past and our elders and our ancestors and their lived experiences, because we ultimately find it restorative and empowering. And we want to sort of pass that information on to successive generations in the same way it was passed on to us, care and concern about our communities and our culture and our history. And I think that this work in terms of inviting young people into doing memory work in a way that is edifying and restorative, it is sort of vital for any sort of positive future we want to create. And I think we need to continue to work in terms of building that future, cultivating that historical knowledge, and allowing teens and young people and people who are marginalized from sharing their thoughts and perspectives on history. We have to give them the space to do so. Give in our institutions, we have to be the advocates within our institution to give the space to those who have historically been denied the space to share their stories and their histories from their perspectives.
Absolutely. Perspective is key. And it's very much so evidenced in some of the teams' work, even between them, reviewing the same documents, the same things, just the responses that they have, the way that they build on each other. And to your point, Skyla, about co-piloting, it wasn't even that. I was a passenger. They were, navigating the vehicle, so to speak. And to see the light bulbs go off when they made those connections, to see them get excited about these stories. One of you, it may have been you, Skyla, spoke about places of power, and, it doesn't have to be a physical place, but knowing the truth of these neighborhoods that, were considered to be blighted or, neglected or, without a story, it was powerful. You could see them standing up a bit straighter, well, on Zoom, sitting up a bit straighter, absorbing, the facts of the world around them, that history happened in their neighborhoods as well, that they too could affect change, that, there really is no limit. It's the limit is their own imagination. And that, to me, was my own personal takeaway. There is no limit. Once you have that knowledge, you can speculate many different things. You can create a future as you see fit. It was powerful working with them. And I'm looking forward to the next steps with each and every one of those young people.
Yeah, and I think the best thing is to imagine sort of the possibilities that these young people can create when we we're not old people, but when we give them the space to create, right? I think some of the things that we sort of look at as learn practices about shared authority, about sort of community centric approaches, these things that we sometimes theorize, these are the lived realities of the teens. Anytime I work with young people, I'm shocked at just sort of how instinctively and intuitively they collaborate, they're inclusive, they really sort of want to build the futures that we often talk about wanting to see, and they can do it instinctively and intuitively. So we just simply need to give them the space and make the room for them, and they will create the work that is going to change the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add very quickly to that. We do have two questions, which I'm happy to share with everyone. But just to add to that very quickly, and by doing so, what they're also doing too is effectively creating evidence, which puts them in history as well. Which, for me as an archivist, and I'm sure you as historian and educator as well, to create like contextualized information, which is then published and then becomes a part of the historical record. It again is so extremely powerful. So we have two questions, and you all can answer them in any order that you like. The first that I saw come through was, where does your inspiration for this work come from? Who inspires you? So that's the first question. The second is, and that was from Lynn Turner, our interim secretary to the Board of Commissioners, who is also my supervisor. Thank you, Lynn, for that question. And the second from Alex Ensign, our Deputy Director of Communication, asks, I'd love to hear if Erica and Julius think there's sort of a connection between this youth-led project and the youth-led effort to rename Douglas Park and other places being renamed and reimagined. Does this seem like part of a larger youth-led movement?
Those are both great questions, and I wish we had another 10, maybe 20 minutes to really dive into both. Julius, did you want to take one first, or you're okay to let me respond?
Oh, please go first. Yes.
Okay, I'll be quick. So to Alex's question, it's always youth that are challenging the systems. It's always youth that, not scream at the Raptors, but they're always at the head of these types of movements, and there is definitely connectivity between efforts of young people now to rename Douglas Park, to those that were active in the removal of, statues around our city that, are harmful for many. So I'm not surprised at that question, but the answer is a resounding yes. They're all connected. As young people get this knowledge, the world as we know it is going to be theirs one day. They want to fashion it in their own image. Every successive generation in the US, there are some common battles that we'll continue to face that deal with our nation's origin and some of the policies and so forth. But, the way that young people respond over time has changed, has become more readily available, how they share and galvanize each other and move toward collective action. We see that happens really quickly now. But that common thread between them all is the desire to see change, the desire to want to live in a world that's better, in a world that is more inclusive, with true representations of our society as it is today, abounding everywhere. So connections are there, most certainly. Julius, did you want to respond to that one before the inspiration question?
Yeah, I would just echo everything that Erica said. The young people, I think, really sort of understand the urgency of the moment in a way that some of us often don't. We sort of get more plotting, more sort of perspective, which is good on the one hand because we're able to see longer arcs. But our young people really are bringing the urgency to these issues and also the moral clarity to these issues, right? They understand why certain things are unjust, unequitable, and they don't want to spend a lot of time talking in circles about it, right? They want to see action on a whole host of issues that are going to define their reality after all of us are gone, right? They're going to have to live with the remnants of the world we leave them ravaged by climate change, right? They're going to have to live in these interesting consequences of these things, and so they are speaking with an urgency that I think we'd be wise to heed.
Absolutely. I am co-signing you again, Julius. Did you want to speak to who or what inspires you? I don't know if I've ever been in a conversation where you've had to answer that. I would love to hear.
well, I get inspiration from a lot of things. Like I get inspiration from history itself, right? What men have done, men can do, right? That's a old adage, right? And it can be extrapolated to be inclusive, right? That we can sort of see stories in our history that inspire us and can sort of help us understand, well, if I am descendant of people who persevered through that, I can persevere through this. And I think that that's something that comes through. I'm confident. I'm always inspired by my colleagues, two of whom I'm here on this panel with. I'm always in awe of your work, and it inspires me. I'm sort of inspired by my students. So I teach at UIC. And me and Skyla share stories about teaching at UIC. And they inspire me because, as I said, they sort of get it. They understand it deeply and intimately, and they are truly interested in learning history so that they can actualize the best future for themselves and for the world. And it is inspiring. And anyone who sort of tells you that young people don't like history is a liar, right? I teach history They're not like they're kicking down the door asking, can they please, enroll in the class even though it's full. So our young people are interested in history.
I think that might be a testament to your teaching prowess, Julius, amongst many things. Like Julius, I'm inspired by history as well. And for me, that connection to history and looking to learn from it, to imagine a future, but also for me to add to narratives that have been missing is a big part of my family legacy, and that continuously fuels me and pushes me forward. And I have a voracious appetite for truth, for inclusion, for understanding the ways that history impacts different people in different ways. I feel like I'm a sponge. History is all around us, and in as often as many ways I can absorb it, I look forward to the opportunities. So history now and always for me.
Like you, Erica, I'm like, wow, I've never really had to answer that question, especially on the spot. But the first thing that I thought about is when I experience something that, I think is, lesser known, right? Or just extremely motivating. I want other people to share in that experience. And I'm like, how do I do that? Right? Like, how do I share this out with everyone? And, fortunately for me, I'm an archivist. And that is, one of our tenets, which is to promote, right? To promote the archives, promote access, provide access, rather, excuse me. And I think actually before even becoming an archivist, when I was a photographer, and, just from being a younger person when I was young, and I think about, how I was inspired by these stories, often about Black people, about African Americans. And I was like, why doesn't anyone else know about this? Right. And at that time, of course, I didn't know anything about being an archivist, But then, fast forward into my professional life, and again, experiencing being in these different places and wanting everyone else to know, like, that is very inspiring for me to figure out ways to connect people, and it may sound, kumbaya, which is fine. I don't mind that. I'll hug the trees, I'll hug the people, because, I want us to be in a place where we can connect with each other, with the very keen understanding of, how we overlap as people, right? Our cultures, how we connect, how, all of these things. And I am inspired, right? To continuously think about, bridging connections between us as people, because, I really do feel that we can live in a much more, just world, just environment. And I want that. I want that for my children. I want that, for your children, for our children, for the future. I want that for us is, people, grown folks, any age, living right now, right? We deserve better. And I think that we can all do better. So, that's my inspiration, right? To keep this whole thing going, and figuring out, ways to do of doing that. And then, I'm just going to throw this out here. I know we have like 1 minute left, because we had one other question that came through, and let me see if I can scroll up and find it, which, I thought was pretty good. And we probably won't get an opportunity to really answer this, but I do want everyone to know that we are accessible through our emails. And so we'll share that with you all. So like I said, if we don't really get to it today, then please feel free to reach out to us via email. And this last one, which I'll just put on our mind since we're pretty much at time, which is, how can young people, we'll take 5 minutes, 5 solid. How can young people prepare themselves for a career in fields that relate to history when the field is dominated by ... older people? Okay, I'll start to answer that question since I'm already talking, if you don't mind. Like this, Yeah, true indeed. We are older people, but like Julia said, we're not old. And I mean, there's proof in the pudding. So it's a good thing that we are older because we have the level of experience and skills and this value that we bring, by way of being older, so that we can then impart that to younger people, passing the torch on and encouraging them to do as we have, as well as more, to be greater, right? Like that's what we're here for. We're here to encourage greatness. We're here to encourage excellence. And I think that this is the way that we do it. As Julia said, by providing these opportunities, by moving to the side and inviting them in. And also, again, as we've been talking about this whole entire time, from this person-centered approach, listening, right, and acting based on what it is that we've been told, and I don't mind saying that, by younger people to do, and by being led by what it is that they say that they want, that they need, right? So that's my quick and dirty response to that question. Erica, Julius.
Yeah, my experience is always that, the field is maybe dominated by old people, but you can change the boundaries of the field, right? And I think that young people have an advantage, because they know what is now and they know what's next, right? And I think that bringing themselves and their experiences to the table, their expertise, their knowledge, and their passion for history, they can do things that will expand the field of history, of archives, of education, of memory work beyond even what we can certainly do or even conceptualize, right? When we look at these projects that the young people did in the Voice Project, they expand our perspectives, right? They push our boundaries, right? And so they become the fundamentally the new contours of the field. And I think technology and innovation and all of those things are going to be the future, and it's going to be led by young people. And the field the field wants to be relevant, it wants to be topical, so it will make space for young people in their energies, in their visions, in their work, because we understand that if we don't train up the next generation of cultural producers and memory workers and historians and archivists and educators, there aren't going to be any of those things, right? And I think we are all committed to doing that, and have done so in our careers, and will continue to do so.
I can't do anything but agree with my two colleagues. They think in a different way than we do. They will be able to use and create tools to help continue the work that we're doing in ways that we can't even conceive of yet. All we have to do is give them the space and the time to develop. And I feel that we are all doing that in our different ways, through the team projects at CHM, through the work that Skyla does through Cook County. We are making space to sharpen their perception, to sharpen their understanding of history. And we are shifting those parameters of what museums are supposed to be, for what memory work is and who does that work, most importantly. And all I'm doing is sitting back and watching our young people get to work. And it's fascinating to see. I did want to, for the audience, share our contact information. Should you need to reach us, please feel free to reach out. There's my email address at the History Museum, Julius's as well, and then also Skyla's at the county. Any questions, comments, suggestions that you might have, we are open. We are hopeful that you'll reach out to us, and we look forward to your emails. Mm-hmm. And with that, I will turn it back over to Skyla to close us out for the evening.
Thank you, Erica, so much. And I didn't say this in the beginning, but thank you, Denise, our inaugural Director of Equity and Inclusion, and Alex, and the rest of the team, for coordinating this very meaningful program, which has been taking place all week long. Still have the rest of today and tomorrow as well. So I hope that you all will continue to join us for our 2021 Cook County Racial Equity Week. So thank you all again. Thank you so much, Erica and Julius, for being here in conversation with me. And thank you to our audience for joining us. And everyone have a fantastic evening and be safe and be well. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.